Hello.
Yeah, Kansha, we'll just start in 5 minutes. Okay.
Cool.
Sure. Hello. Hello. Yeah, guys, am I audible to everyone?
Yeah, you are.
Sure, sure. So I think we can start now, although many people are yet to join, but we're already running 8 minutes late of the particular timeline because we can start. So first of all,
Uh,
I'll welcome the host today. So Akansha is the host, and she is going to share her interview experience with Google. So a little background about her. She is actually from BITS Pilani and she has recently cracked many interviews, including Google as well. And thanks to her, she actually agreed to share her interview experience with everyone here so that we can learn from her interview experience. And along with the experience itself, we can learn how did she prepare for the interview itself. Okay. So we'll go like that. Akansha will share her experience first, and after she finishes her up with her experience, we'll have a FAQ session. Okay. So over to you, Akansha.
cool. Hello, I'm Akankshya, and I'll be talking about my interview experience with Google. Um, while talking about my experience, it's also more about what it is, what you should keep in mind when preparing for a company like Google. Um, okay, so I've given plenty of interviews with respect to a software engineering role, and yeah, I'll try to highlight what I feel is a difference when interviewing with Google versus other companies. First of all, in my campus, Google had a round of resume shortlisting when it came for placements. It's kind of hard to understand their algorithm for shortlisting there, but a couple of things that seem to help you are CG, past internship experiences in prestigious companies, experience with GSOC, programming competitions like Kickstart or ICPC. I think around 13 people were shortlisted, and I was one of them. And we had on-site interviews at the Gurgaon office. By the way, I'm audible, right? And I'm not going too fast.
No, Akansha, you're audible. I think you're going at a decent pace.
Cool.
Go on.
Um, right. So Google does a pretty good job of publicizing interview preparation material, and they quite truthfully state what they're going to ask. And DSA is on top of that list. They even outline all the things that you're supposed to know. So if you're interviewing with them in the near future, do go through these as a checklist. Uh, there's this cool. There's this one video on their site. It's an example of a Google coding interview, and it is extremely alike to what it was interviewing for them. So I'm not going to go through specific questions because of well, there's an NDA, and honestly, you could find a question bank very easily on Google itself. Um, I'll go through the type of questions and the way you're expected to tackle them. One thing that every single interviewer at Google did was phrase the question or questions that they posed in a single simple sentence. It could be something as simple as I want you to sort the values in an array. You're expected to pose questions according to what you think you need to solve the question. They don't expect someone who has committed every single tactic of competitive coding into their heads. They just they basically want someone who has a good hold over the concepts, can code reasonably well, and they're able to navigate through the process that a typical problem or project may take. For example, corner cases, information about the data, quantity of data, and how that affects your algorithm. So yeah, so there's no hurry to code because there's usually only one question in around 30 to 45 minutes. Again, that depends on your interviewer. Once you have asked the interviewer all the information that you need, you're asked to code up the solution. I was coding on a Chromebook, which they provided, and only on the text file. So there was no helper for syntax or predictions. So if you're someone who always relies on your IDE, and I think that's pretty much the same for most companies, just break out of that and try at least try coding basic stuff on maybe a Google Doc. or just a text editor, plain text editor. Um, yeah, and also, yeah, try to remember syntax of basic libraries that you may use. So I always discuss the brute force solution first, unless an optimized solution is very obvious. Because optimizing a code in terms of space or time can be very intuitive if you tune yourself to always construct a brute force solution in words first. And sometimes they're looking for that. So yeah, you might be asked to code a less optimized version of the code. I mean, you may propose a brute force solution, and you'd be surprised the interviewer is actually up for letting you code it because they want to see if you can alter your code and optimize it further. Like, right? I mean, can you extend your code to optimize it? Can you extend it to add any extra information that the interviewer might pose? Or do you have to scrap your entire code and start again? Those are some of the things that have to be kept in mind. Um, so, discussion is really the main driving force that I saw in interviews with Google, every single one of my tech interviews. Um, I've seen that present in interviews with other company, but not at the level here. You should be able to articulate your thinking properly. It doesn't matter if you take the long route to get to a solution or it clicks instantly. They want to prod your problem solving skills. And like if you rattle off a learned answer, they will either change the data or the objective or something like that. If you're stuck somewhere, I mean, for me, there's two kind of situations. One is where I'm thinking so much, but I'm not saying anything, and that's really bad. I've seen people I've seen the interviewer think that I didn't understand the question when I'm just thinking about possible solutions in my head. Um, yeah, that's really important, especially here. You should practice talking out loud to yourself when coding once or twice, and mock interviews. Mock interviews are very important. You cannot freeze up while thinking because the interviewer will end up giving you a hint you don't need and you won't be able to convey your thought process accurately. Um, well, the other situation where I'm quiet as well, my mind is blank at the sight of a problem. It happens. But the interview is human, so don't worry. Um, they pretty much always will give you a hint and or they will tell you to discuss some part of the problem. The objective is to help you get to the solution. So working with them is the best way to arrive to it. Um, Now, when you're coding, it's easy to use templates, especially when you're into competitive. But when it comes to interviews, um, I had to be very careful naming my variables and functions, and I was even asked to name it in a proper manner because the code has to be readable. The code that you write on your interview day is sent to an external reviewing committee and sometimes is run as well. You don't need to be overly conservative with big names, but just don't code as if no one is going to see the code ever again. And don't make a variable X or A or B, stuff like that. The type of questions asked in my interviews were based on dynamic programming, binary search, n-ary trees, graphs, and hash tables. So I would say that they would be on any level that you would find on sites like InterviewBit, especially because InterviewBit, Lead Code, and stuff. They tag questions based on if they've appeared with certain companies before. You won't see the same question, of course, but I feel if you're able to work out some of these questions, you will be able to tackle a question that you would face in, say, a Google interview. Um, if you're if you're giving any sort of an online coding competition, I would say that it would be one of the easier questions, like the first, like maybe the second question you would see on if you're participating in a competition in code forces, places like that. If you're from a computer science background, you were expected to understand basic concepts of OS and OOP, which may be discussed as well during coding or post that. So once you've completed your code and the interviewer is happy with it, he or she would ask you if you have any questions for them. Yeah, this is important. you have to ask them stuff. I am someone who doesn't like to bother the other person, and I have said no to this question before. It's the stupidest thing you can do because it shows that you're not interested to know about the job itself. I've gotten to talk to the interviewers as actual people post the interviews, and they're all pretty chill about telling you more about life and work at the company. So do use the opportunity. My final interview was with the HR. The HR interview at Google is extremely unique. They do go through your resume to discuss any group based projects you may have been involved in and your views on teamwork and morale. It's harder than the coding interviews, in my opinion, but I'm pretty sure if you're not a horrible person and you have a good working ethic, you'd be good to go. Do go through your resume and think about what you may have learned from the experiences that you're mentioning on it. They're just trying to see if you fit in with the kind of teams that work at Google. You may be asked general questions like your strengths and weaknesses. Do admit weaknesses, and if you've worked towards them, don't just mention stuff like working too hard. So, yes, don't take the HR interview as something you can just soar through because they tend to be not very straightforward with it. So after the interview, it took around a month before I got the confirmation. So being patient is a huge part of it. Okay, I actually finished very early. Hello.
Yeah. So I guess we can open up the floor for questions and answers. Is that all right to do so?
Yeah, it's all right. I
Yeah.
can think about things
I,
I haven't covered till then.
yeah. So that was basically in a nutshell her experience, and you can. She would be happy to answer your questions, and we can open up the floor for questions right now. So people who have questions, you can raise your hands, and I can moderate, and you can ask one by one. Yeah, Sahars, you can unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hello, ma'am.
Don't call me ma'am. Just go on.
Hello.
Yeah.
So I want to ask, how if we prepare from websites like LeetCode and Geeks for Geeks, is it sufficient for cracking interviews in company like Google? Because I have seen like competitive coding on Code Forces, Code Chef, high topics, like very difficult topics. Is it like that in Google that topics are asked?
So no. For me, at least, I went through the topics that were asked in my interviews, and I would say if you complete a site like Interview Bit, then you would be prepared for it. Of course, it's possible that you may be asked a harder question, but honestly, in all 13 of us, I did not see that happen. And if you are unlucky, then it's fine to say that you don't know it. And as I said, Google does have a list on their site with the interview preparation material covering all the things that you need to do. You need to be good at competitive programming. You need to have say if you're participating in competitions on sites like Code Forces, you need to be able to solve a minimum of 2 or 3 of those questions, I would say. But you don't need to be a complete god. Like um, put in enough effort on like sites like InterviewBit and LeetCode, which um, are sites like this, which offer you problems where you can learn and do
Hmm.
practice as well. But you don't need to spend 8 hours a day just coding day after day. Just need to have a good hold over the basic concepts.
Okay. 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 Thanks.
Yeah, next question we have from Utsav. Utsav, you can unmute yourself and ask.
So I had a similar question only to what the previous
Oh,
question was.
all right, Shravan, you are up next.
So actually, till what extent the projects play a role in the interview? I mean, at least to get the interview and in the interview.
So I would say that they play a role in both. To get the interview, Now, that depends on what all is on your resume. Say that your CG is a little bit low, on the lower side, then yes, if you have good projects on your resume and in which you have some good deliverables, or say you worked on something interesting, something that a place like Google will also be interested in, data mining, information retrieval, stuff like that, then they do play a role. Um, Especially if you're doing something like that as part of an internship in another company, uh, especially prestigious internships. Um, and when it comes to interviews, some interviewers will maybe spend 5 minutes. The tech interviewers will spend 5 minutes at the starting of your interview, maybe discussing a project with you, something that catches their eye. But the HR interviewer will go through all of your projects, but from the point of view of what it was like to work in a team, not you know uh, the nitty gritty of the project. So yeah, I think it plays more of a role in fleshing out your resume than it does in the interview.
So actually, I kind of doesn't have so much good projects. So will
Mhm.
it affect in the process of interview or before the select, even for the select?
See, okay, so you've got to have something on your resume that that you need to have certain spikes on your resume. If you don't think that you have say good projects, then try to build your profile in the competitive coding arena. Try enroll into competitions like Kickstart. Kickstart is by Google, and they really notice it if you are participating in it. So if you can write something like that in your resume, that's good enough. Like that's good enough for them in place of say a good project.
Okay.
Hemant has a question. Hemant, you can go ahead and ask your question. Hemant, you can unmute yourself and ask.
Hello.
Yeah, hello.
Yes, ma'am. Like, what would you define as good projects?
Um, I would say a good project is something that you've been either involved for a long period of time, or you're working in, say, a good lab, or which has some concrete deliverables by the end, or it can just be something with a nice name. I mean, to be honest, right? You have to have something which has like, if you're doing something good, but you're not able to convey that properly, then that's bad for you. So obviously, writing your resume is important. Like phrasing exactly what you're doing is very important. I mean, you can give me a sort of an example if you know you're talking from a point of view. Doesn't have to be too personal.
Okay, thank you.
So maybe
Okay.
Akanksha, what you can talk about is you can talk about the areas or the specific topics from which they asked you questions. I mean, not really going into the too much details on the question since we understand that it's an NDA. But
Yeah,
you
yeah,
can
yeah.
just give them
No,
a little bit
yeah,
of
no.
like what particular topics to focus in, even within algorithms and data structures. That might help them.
Okay. That's actually what I just briefly said it, didn't I? Completely forgot. Hold on. Yeah. So my first interview was a question based on n trees and dynamic programming. Um, so what I did was I mean I gave a very extreme I gave an extremely bad solution at the starting. At some point, it clicked onto me that I should use dynamic programming. And of course, I had to create my own data structures because sometimes an interviewer will let you use a library and sometimes they won't. Um, so I created my own data structure and then I implemented my code. And post that, there were some suggestions to to reduce the space complexity. So yeah, so one was dynamic programming. My second was based on binary search, I think. Yeah. My third was again dynamic programming. Um, what was the third one? Yes, third one was dynamic programming, and I was asked a second question also on graphs, something related to topological sort. I don't remember all of the questions all that well. Yeah, topological sort, and the fourth one was again it was a combination of sorting, binary search, and hash tables. So yeah, you have to be familiar with data structures in the language that you're coding in, as well as, I mean, if you don't have the library, like, can you code it up yourself? Yeah, so I had 4 tech interviews, so these were the questions that were asked.
Cool. Do we have any more questions? The other thing you could talk about is maybe apart from Google, your experiences with other companies and what you think, uh, how should students go about preparing for these kind of technical interviews in general and not for Google in particular. That also.
So, okay. So I had a lot of interviews when I was going for my internship, and a lot of them were bad ones. So there's something to learn from that. Okay, so preparing for an interview is preparing for an interview means approaching different kinds of questions than you would for, let's say, the coding test that is taken before getting into the interview. There are certain kinds of questions that most companies like to ask, and question banks for these are like they're easily available, and DMAX also is providing pretty good banks, I think. Um, yeah, practicing and mastering that is first. Then being able to, like, for me, it was kind of easy to write code on paper. It didn't take that much practice. But for someone who is not able to write code on paper that well, because interviews with companies like Microsoft or Samsung, they expected me to write code on the paper that you have. If it's an on-campus interview, off-campus you may be asked to code on a Google Doc. But okay, on campus, if you have to write on paper, and if you're not comfortable, then you should practice that first of all, um, because nobody like and because on a computer you can always just add a line very easily, but there you can't. um, I would say that as I said, the amount of uh, discussion I had in my interviews with Google was a lot. In other companies, there would be a question given, and you would find that I mean, for me at least, I was speaking more than the interviewer, although every interviewer does expect for you to have an active discussion with them while solving the problem.
Yeah, Maghav has a question, I guess. Maghav?
Yeah, hi. I just wanted to ask if you ever gave Google Kickstart.
Yeah, I did participate in a few.
So, I mean, what is the rank that we got, or what is the rank on which we get a call from Google?
I don't remember, dude. Like, this was last year. I didn't get a good enough rank to get a call from Google. Definitely not. You have to be in the top 100, I think.
Okay.
And for me, it was as much practice as it was. It was not about getting that on my resume or anything. It was more for just practice along the way.
Okay, sure.
But yeah, I mean, it's very possible for you to get a call through it.
Ma'am,
Yep,
I have checked your LinkedIn profile that you are interned at JPMC, right? So,
yep,
is it off campus or on campus?
on campus.
Okay. What, like on what topics they ask questions? Mostly, like other companies also.
Yeah, just hold on. Let me remember what that is. Okay, so I would assume that if you're preparing for say placements, you would know some of the the main topics that people usually ask questions from. Like let's say, okay, let's take it this way. Microsoft usually asks questions on linked lists. Like linked list is something that you will see. Sorting is something that they love. They will and they want you to do it without using any libraries, stuff like that. That's what I remember from Microsoft. Um, um, Even Samsung asks questions from binary search and arrays. So you will find that like only like if you're a little bit unlucky, only then do you get asked a question from dynamic programming. Even with JPMC, I'm yes, I had a question on bits, like overlapping bits basically. It had to do with arrays. So what I'm saying is, if you're unlucky, then you may be asked a question from dynamic programming or graphs. Most companies tend to focus on the basics: arrays, linked lists, binary search. These are the things that you need to get a proper hold on. Even if you don't complete, say, all of the questions of you know topics like dynamic programming or graphs, you should definitely cover all of the concepts of the simpler topics, because you're more likely to be asked something from there. And yeah, does that answer your question?
Okay, yes, ma'am. Thanks.
Yeah, so we have a question from the live stream.
Hmm.
Akul Malhotra has a question. This is more a motivational question. How did you stay focused during the preparation period?
um, okay, so when I was preparing, when I was preparing for my placements, I was actually doing my internship in Bangalore. So I would say if you want to remain focused, then you have to surround yourself with people that you, I would say, admire, or you need to have good mentors, or you need to have someone who would support you through the process, because honestly, it's like a course you're doing, so it does take time and effort to learn all the concepts. So if you ever feel disheartened that you do a hackathon and you're not able to solve questions, then it's always nice to talk to someone who's been through the process, because we've all been there. We've all been to the hackathon where you can only solve one question, or you can only attempt one question. That's not a great feeling, but everybody starts somewhere, and sometimes it may feel like it's a slow process, but you do learn. Like I've never seen someone go through it and not have learned stuff.
All right. Gurtej has a follow-up question. Like, how much time did you in all spend for preparation?
In all, so as I said, I was doing my internship when in Bangalore while I was preparing. So I would say maybe 1 hour or 2 hours in a weekday, and maybe around 4 hours each week, each on Saturday, Sunday. I mean, you do the calculation there, but I wasn't able to fit in a lot, of course, because I'm doing an internship as well. But it's about quality, not quantity. You can rectify every single question, but you really have to focus on the understanding more than all of the tricks of the trade.
Yeah, so we have one more question from Facebook. I think it's specific to your work at JP Morgan. So Rahul Otwani has asked, how was work life at JPMC, and do you also have an offer from JPMC too?
So the work life at JPMC was good. Timings were more or less flexible for me, and I mean, I don't really have much more to say than that, because it was a good project. I learned stuff, and well, yeah, but I did not. I wanted to sit for placements. Therefore, so GPMC has this pre-placement interview sort of a thing. So I actually said no. So no, I did not get an offer from JPMC, but it's a good place to join, and I have a couple of friends working there as well. I did want to sit for placements, so that was in the back of my mind from the start.
Sure, I think that does answer the question. So we have another question from YouTube from Manoj. He's asking, apart from Google, did you crack any other interviews, and how was your experience with that company?
Apart from Google, so Google was technically off campus. On campus, I did clear for Microsoft as well. So it was a good experience interviewing on campus as well. Um, so Microsoft has this process where, and they typically have this in most colleges or places they go to. They have uh, the first coding test on their own platform. Then they have something called a group fly, where they get in, they make groups of 6, and they have people code 1 or 2 questions on paper. Here you have, say, someone assigned to your group who you have to discuss your solution with, and 1 or 2 people are picked from each group for the final interview. So the coding test had 3 questions. They were pretty easy based on um, arrays and linked lists, as far as I can remember. Yeah, something. I think one of them was deleting k elements from a linked list. I think there's some sort of a question like that. Then the group fly, and I had also sat for the Microsoft interview experience. So this is one thing I can say, that Microsoft loves sorting algorithm questions, which you have to implement on your own, on say a different kind of data or something, without any libraries. So that was there. And then my interview experience was it was nice. I remember 3 interviews. All were technical. The first 2 interviews. Oh no, okay, yeah. So the first interview was based on DSA. I don't recall the question much, but it was again, it was based on a basic topic. The first interview. The second interview, I was asked. Yes, there was one basic DSA question based on hash tables, and then the interviewer discussed operating systems with me. very extensively. Then the third interview was focused on my projects. So yeah, so when you're interviewing for other companies, like for Google, I know I did not have to discuss my project so much in a technical perspective, but yeah, so many companies have that one round where it it's sort of like an HR round, but there's a technical interviewer, and he wants to see if you have done any sort of project before, and what was your experience, and can you explain the project? It doesn't matter if it's a hi-fi project or if it's. You should just be familiar with everything that you put on your resume, because you don't want to be put on the spot there and not remember anything about a project of maybe 2 years ago that you've put on there. Although they do tend to focus on the major projects. So yeah, that was my interview experience with Microsoft.
Vivin, do you have a question? I see that you unmuted yourself. So I guess like if we were to summarize, it is that different companies have different topics that they are fond of. Like you said
Yeah.
that Microsoft has like loves searching and sorting. Like similarly, Google has a certain other set of topics for which they have a particular affection towards. And
Yeah.
generally, it's like more about focusing on the basics and not so much the advanced topics.
Yeah,
Within,
that's true.
yeah, I don't. But our students here at DMAX, I don't know. They are like they have a strong inclination for dynamic programming. So there's a question from
Okay.
Vivin. Yeah, I don't know. They have like they just want to study DP and graphs.
Yeah, that's the thing. You should focus on the basics. That's important more than DP and graphs. That you.
People don't turn up for searching and sorting. They just want DP and graphs.
Oh God, that will bite you later. When people ask you to implement a quick sort on your own without any libraries, it's not so easy to
Yeah,
avoid all the bugs.
yeah. Same for stacks, queues. Like when you talk about
Yeah.
topics, like most of them don't attend classes. I mean, okay, we have another question. From Vivin, how do you build a strong profile to get a call from companies like Google?
Um. So Google looks for a collection of things like So of course I don't know Google's algorithm for selecting people, but looking at the type of people selected, you can draw a conclusion. There are some things that they seem to care about. People with high, if you have a high CG, you are preferred. If you have, say, past internship experiences in prestigious companies, you are preferred. If you have an experience with GSOC, programming competitions, and doesn't have to be something by Google. It can be that you participated in ICPC, or there's Facebook Hacker Cup. This Kickstart is always there. But yeah, so and say if you're working on good projects somewhere, they're just you need to have certain spikes on your resume if you want to get noticed by a company like Google. That is true. So if you are lacking in anything, then um, you can work towards it. I mean, so the best way to work towards it is, I believe, is to build a competitive coding profile, because that is looked upon most favorably. Um, and I've seen many people who interview for Google maybe once, twice, thrice, get rejected, and they still go for the fourth time and are selected. So it's never like if they don't take you in the first round, then they're never going to consider you again. So yeah, I mean, you do have to put in work. And even if it's not like projects in your colleges, then try to do something on your own. There are many challenges and workshops out there, you can, just try to do something on your own so that you are looked upon as someone who who is eager to learn. So yeah, well, I would say that would be my answer.
Yeah, so Akansha, we have another question from Avinav. He's asking that how were you able to manage your internships and preparation for interview at the same time? I believe he meant to ask that, how did you prepare for interview while doing your internship?
Yeah, so that was not easy. If you have a commitment while you are preparing for placements, then you have to realize that you're going to have to pass on some things. Say if you're currently you have classes or something and you're exhausted by the time you go back, I would say put 1 hour of work every day. That needs to be done. You can't just code on the weekends. You need to be coding every day, not 8 hours per day, but maybe 1 hour per day. It is hard, but I mean, you're gonna have to compromise on certain things. It's true. 1 hour, half an hour per day, just catch up on one question a day on the weekdays if you're extremely, caught up. On the weekends, I would say so for me on the weekend, I used to participate in at least one code forces competition or one hackathon, like anywhere that you want to, so that you can you can get used to working in a timed scenario. Then sometimes if I used to get breaks, then I could read up on some theory. But yeah, it was packed, and if it is packed for you, then well, something is better than nothing. That's what I would say.
Yeah, so we have another question from Vardhan. Vardhan, I believe it's better if you can just speak up and ask it yourself.
Ma'am, does Google have a system design round as well in the interviews, or does it depend solely on the interviewer whether for some candidates they'll have it and for some candidates they don't have?
So Google doesn't usually ask system design. In fact, Google doesn't usually stray from common DSA questions. So Google doesn't normally stray from common DSA questions. I've seen if somebody says that they like Java, then they'll end up asking them 1 or 2 things from OOP. But usually the interviewer comes prepared with 1, 2, or maybe 3 basic algorithm-based questions, and they can ask you that. System design is usually asked to people who have like a certain amount of experience. And but Microsoft did have a system design round, which I was lucky enough not to get. A little bit of luck does play here. So don't take me on my word and not do like system design at all. But it's extremely uncommon. That's what I would say.
Yeah, I guess we have a similar question from Vikas as well. Vikas, would you like to add anything to what Vardhan has asked?
No. That's
Okay, sure.
Yeah, do we have any other questions? Like, I guess we are already 50 minutes into the session. So we will wrap it up very soon. It's already getting late for her.
No, not for me. For you guys. I'm sorry.
You are 3 hours behind, is it?
No, I am 4 hours
4 hours.
behind, so it's okay. 4.5.
Okay. Any more questions do we have? So just for the interest of others in the group, can someone volunteer to summarize this session and post it in the group? Can we have that? I guess that might be useful for people who are giving their tests or interviews and who couldn't join for some reason. Does that make sense to do that? Can anyone volunteer for that? No one? Vikas, Utsav. Yeah, okay, just one of you can do that maybe. Okay, Utsav, maybe Yeah, Vikas and Utsav, maybe you guys can just talk to each other and come up with some sort of a write-up that you can post in the group, which might be helpful for people who couldn't join. Cool. Okay. And yeah, I guess if we don't have any other questions, we can. Vardhan has a question. Yeah, Vardhan.
I just wanted to ask that how did you prepare for topics like bit masking or segmentary? Because these are quite doubtful topics. You don't really develop confidence in them despite knowing the concept. So, how was your preparation regarding such kind of topics when you were going to face the Google interview?
Honestly, I did not cover segmentaries properly. I had I guess the number of questions that I've done on segmentaries myself, I can count on my hands. So yeah, so that's what I said. Um, I was very confident in implementations and everything on the basic side, and everything that I would consider on the trickier side. I had covered at least once before, um, and everything that I would consider on the tough, the side that is usually not asked. I was good with the theory and had done, I would say, not too many questions on it, because unless you're really interested, okay, unless you have a if you have a good comparative coding profile, then you are expected to have encountered such questions multiple times, and therefore if you get a question on that, it's fair game. But if you don't have such a stellar profile, then they're also not going to ask you something of that level. And if it is, and so you should basically be at a level where you can um, recognize certain kinds of questions, but also know that an interviewer is not going to is also looks through your profile before he asks you a question. If he does see something like ICPC on your profile, then you can expect harder questions. But yes, I would say every kind of all the topics that are expected, like if you take a judgment from all types of companies and you get all the topics, then you should be, if anybody poses any question to you from any of those topics, you should be comfortable in solving them. If you are at that level, then I would say you have a very good chance of cracking an interview.
Yeah, I guess just to add to that, for campus interviews, typically that's what they are looking for. So they just want to know whether what you know, do you know it well enough? And I guess I mean, from my experiences as well, like there were times when I just made it explicit to the interviewer that I don't know that particular topic and it's on the harder side, it's not been taught. And I guess the interviewer was fine with that and he just moved on. So it's not really a diverse set of topics that you cover. It's more like what you know, do you know it well enough? And of course, there are certain basics that you should know.
Yeah, worst case scenario, you're trying to counter it with some brute force questions and you don't know what he's expecting, and it's not always a bad thing.
Yeah, so I guess now we can wrap it up. We have another question from Chirag. Chirag, can you unmute and ask it? Chirag?
Hello.
Yes, Chirag. Yeah.
Sir, I want to ask, other than data structure and algorithm, how should we focus on other subjects like networking, computer organization and architecture, and
So
compiler design?
yeah, got it. Okay, so for Google, I did not face any questions other than some small discussion on operating systems. I would say that this majorly depends on the type of company that you're interviewing for and the type of questions that they usually ask. So if you're interviewing for a company like Cisco, it would be reasonable to expect questions on networking. If you're interviewing for a company like Microsoft, it would be reasonable to expect questions from operating systems. However, if you're a computer science student, you are expected to know all of these topics, basics in all of these topics. By basics, I mean, okay, let me phrase it this way. It is possible that because a little bit of luck does come into all of this, your interviewer might be looking to place you in a certain profile, right? So it is possible that if you are from a computer science background, or if you have courses like OOP on your resume, then you can be asked questions. If you have Java on your resume, then you can be asked questions. So look at it from this point of view. If you're putting something on your resume, you should be able to answer anything that will be asked on it. But I would say there is an order. Like OOP is something where you can expect questions. OS is something where you can expect questions. DBMS is something where you can expect questions. Compiler construction, very less people would ask any questions. Although there is a little bit of luck involved, because during my Microsoft interview, I was actually asked to describe my compiler construction project. But as I said, a little bit of luck. So be prepared on the basics of all the things, and the important topics like OSDB and OOP. You should go through them before you go for your interviews.
Okay, ma'am. Or coming to OOPS concepts, when we talk about different languages, C++, Java, JavaScript, so there are different aspects of OOPS in other languages. So should we know all of them, or like I know most of the OOPS concepts in Java, like.
Do you know C++? It depends.
Yeah, C++.
So okay,
not
I have
much
personally,
in depth.
yeah, it's the same for me. I've actually, I think, yeah, I have been in a situation where someone has asked me if, what did I do, like which language did I do OOP in, and I said Java, and I particularly also, like, if asked a question in C++ in OOP, okay, it depends a little bit on your luck. I will stress this, because if your interviewer expects you, if you have put C++ as well as OOP on your resume, and he expects you to know OOP concepts in C++, then there's nothing you can do about it. The only way to prepare for such a scenario is to learn it beforehand. Okay, but some, like, I would say most of the times, if you say that I did not go through OOP in C++, I studied it in Java, then they'll be fine with it, but you might expect to be asked questions in Java. Most of the times, I think this would not be a problem. Only if you have, if you're a little bit unlucky, then you might be dealt with an interview like that. I've seen both the scenes happen. That's what I'm saying. But just be a little wise about the things you're doing. I mean, you can do everything, or you can, be wise and do the things that are more likely to be there. But yeah, good luck to everyone.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess that sums up everything. And does anyone have any other question? Okay, fine. I think we are already getting late, so we can wrap it up now. But before doing that, Akansha, since most of the students here and even our viewers, they are going to sit in the interview for coming after 2-3 months. So if we just summarize whatever you said in single 2-3 lines, that would be really beneficial for our students.
Okay, that's putting me on the spot.
Yeah, I mean, it's optional. It's totally fine.
You've already
yeah, okay.
spot
Let me.
Google. We have nobody in front of Google.
I would say that if you're preparing for something, don't do it half-heartedly. Put in the hours. Be wise about what you are doing. Don't rote. Focus on understanding the things. Do attend classes that DMARCS is providing, because that will probably be the most useful way to utilize the time you have to study for them. Interact with people, interact with your mentors and your the people who are studying with you, so that you know that's something that will help keep you focused. And and what else? Good luck. That was more of a motivational speech than what I said. So
Yeah, I think that itself is very motivational till now. So I think we can wrap it up now, guys. We have a decent 1 hour session, last 1 hour, and all thanks to Akansha for sharing an experience. I believe that, many of the questions were outside of the syllabus, what we discussed, that we will discuss only interview experience of Google, but yeah, more or less they were very insightful, and I believe that most of us have learned a lot from all of the questions and answer you gave. So thank you, Akansha. Now I think we can close it.
yeah, no problem.
And yeah, we wish you all
Yeah,
the
okay.
best for your future endeavors as well. And yeah,
Wish you guys all the best too.
sure. So yeah, everyone is saying thank you as well. I don't think they can speak, but yeah, now we can end it up. Thanks a lot,
Okay.
guys, for attending as well, and all the viewers who are YouTube and Facebook as well. Okay, thank you.
Okay.